Would like to take this opportunity to initiate the field testing of the Keith Titanium Pocket Flask. Keith Titanium goes without saying, almost without saying, that it's titanium products. In this case, we've already opened up and initially examined the Titanium Pocket Flask made by Keith Titanium, along with some of the other gear that we have received. And would like very much to get started with a bit of a test and evaluation of this product to see how well it actually performs, and also, you know, with the appropriate beverage contained within, so to speak. This flask has the cap on one end instead of centered. Nice feature with that, and of course seems to have been put together with two clam shell-like seam or pieces with a weld spot around the joining point of that. With any product that you plan to put beverages into, it's a good idea to give it a bit of a rinse, because we really don't know what's deep down inside there from the factory. With that purpose in mind, and one of the nice aspects of this company is it came with a funnel, filler funnel, and the filler funnel fits nice and snug. We'll be able to balance that. Well, let's see if we can. It's a bit particular to what's underneath it, but it balances somewhat. From my angle, I can see that there's a little bit of a tilt. We'll use some distilled water for the rinsing process, and just form and function. The filler funnel seems to work very well. Let's cap this off. There is no silicone component on the inside. No, I take it back. Strike that. I am corrected. There is a silicone disc on the inside of the cap. Probably a bit more effective than using an O-ring. So let's shake this up. I'll give it a bit of a rinse off camera. We'll do a double rinse just to be a little more effective. I didn't allow for the vacuum effect, so we lift that funnel just a bit to allow for some airflow. There we go. Try to go a little slower. We'll definitely go a little slower with the actual inherent beverage. Now, with an airtight seal on where the filler cap or funnel fits, we need to allow for some air to come through that to reduce the compression of the air when the fluid is going inside. Probably a good idea that we're doing a dry run. Get it? Dry run with just water. And so if you allow for a more direct fill, we avoid that backup process. So I'm learning along with you here. In my experience, in my history, usually just pour directly into the flask or the carrier because, well, we'll get a little bit of not too much spillage here. Actually, the nice thing is you can squeeze this. Just notice that you can squeeze the walls of the flask to get more fluid to come out, and also to allow for some suction of water back into the interior of the flask. I'm doing that off camera because I don't want to make everything wet around my base here. So now that we've got this, I believe, sufficiently rinsed, I'm not going to worry about drying it out. we can put our funnel back in place, and Balvenie Caribbean Cask 14-year. Might as well use some of this. I think this would be an appropriate test component. So we'll go back to our slower filling process, hopefully getting it directly into the center of the funnel. Yes, it's going center into the funnel. Not getting that back up, or at least not much. Kind of go gingerly. The neck of the bottle fits quite well. You can get an idea by just shaking slightly the flask to get an idea of how full it is. And I'm not going to go all the way to the neck of the flask itself, just so we get an idea that we're almost full. And again, this is for our test and evaluation. Balvenie. Yep. Okay, now the cap goes back on place. You can feel that snugness against the silicone. We'll put the stopper back on the beautiful Balvenie. Tuck this away for transport. I recommend keeping these carry tubes, or these shipping tubes, or display tubes, or the cylinder that a lot of good high-quality whiskeys come in. I recommend, and I usually try to keep those in case I have to travel, and I do travel a bit. And then I have a nice travel container if you can fit it into luggage or fit it into your compartment. So now, this is almost full. We're going to leave this in state for a bit and see how well it travels and stores the whiskey, and compare that to whiskey from the same bottle a bit later. See if we get any transitional taste or anything unusual out of that. So with that said, the Keith Titanium flask, hip flask, we'll see how this develops. This will not necessarily be the final rendition of the test in progress of the Keith Titanium Flask test in progress. Now this is the flask that has, it's got a bit of a seam to it. Yeah, pardon the boo-boo there, but what are you going to do, right? But this is a two-piece flask. It does, as previously noted, it has the or the four rather, stand pieces to help it stand on its end. And it's been performing admirably in that regard. The flask was loaded up with our product, if you will, at least 8 to 10 weeks ago, and was carried for about 2 weeks in its current status as it is now. I didn't unscrew the cap, didn't, as tempting as it was from time to time, I did not open the cap. And in part that was to determine if we would get any leakage or if there would be any failure of that internal gasket. I believe it's silicone on the inside of this cap. And after about 2 to 3 weeks of carrying this in the go bag, and it was bouncing around quite a bit, it was inverted over a white paper towel in a container. So it was contained with a white paper towel, basically nestling it like a nest to see if it would leak at all. There was some temperature changes here and there, nothing significant. We're not talking about above 110 degrees at the most, and no lower than about 110 degrees Fahrenheit, let's be specific, and no lower than about 60 degrees Fahrenheit in low temperature. But at no time did the cap fail, even in the inverted state. And I wanted to see if, it's not completely full, but if that would change anything, or if any internal pressures or what have you would change the dynamic of this seal. There was no observable leakage or failure of the gasket. So at this point, and I believe I've stabilized the palate, so to speak, to check and see if this whiskey, in fact, if there's anything unusual about it. So this will be the opening after about 8 to 9 weeks. We'll check this very quickly, see if we get any perceptible change in pressure. No change in pressure. The threads appear to be intact and nothing significant. The interior gasket, that flat disc type seal of what is most likely silicone, appears to still be intact, even though it's a little faded there. And it smells like the same whiskey that was introduced. Got a little bit of a dribble there. We'll be doing this neat, as I am learning to prefer. Yeah, the Balvenie definitely has the same perceptible Caribbean cask aroma, flavor, whatever the hell you want to call it. Nothing tainted about the contents of this flask at this point, other than my notorious spillage there. So, at least as far as I'm concerned, the titanium flask has performed admirably, and in most circumstances, the contents would have remained intact for the time that we had run this test in progress. So take that to the bank, or take that to the field, or take that wherever you want to take it. And there you go.